At the royal court, Javier approaches the queen for assistance. The queen is cautious and thinks it might be a trick, but she decides to listen. Javier tells her that people from different areas are fleeing to Frontera Barony because of recent problems. He starts to read a heartfelt speech written by Lloyd, but the queen interrupts him, already feeling annoyed. She explains that she needs to talk to her advisors before making a decision. Javier then reads another letter from Lloyd describing his project and how it could help the kingdom. After some thought, the queen agrees to provide funding. Javier also asks for Corgidus to be sent to assist, and the queen agrees to that too. Meanwhile, at the camp, Greg steps outside and sees Emily. He calls out to her for the shawls, but she playfully refuses. They begin to tease each other and enjoy their time together. York watches them from a distance and feels sad because he has feelings for Emily. Other orcs make fun of him, saying a human would never like an orc. Heartbroken, he tosses aside the flowers he had brought for her and walks away. At the mansion, Lloyd wakes up and Sir Bairn checks on him. Lloyd mentions that it's nearly time to pay the workers, but suddenly he coughs and faints. Sir Bairn panics and calls for a doctor. Javier arrives, but instead of being worried, he shows Lloyd some money. Lloyd instantly wakes up full of energy as his special financial healing ability kicks in. The foundation of the Honey apartment building is done. Lloyd uses his special skill to run simulations for all sorts of disasters, even meteors. He finds it amusing to watch the chaos, which makes Javier think he seems a bit crazy. Javier then tells him that Corgidus and 30 dwarf craftsmen have arrived. Lloyd welcomes Corgidus, but skips the small talk to show him the blueprints for new machines. Corgidus gets excited and starts working right away. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Javier use mana blasts to dig into the ground for the foundation. They finish building the cement mixer truck, which has Podong as its engine. The orcs create rebar using iron rods, and Lloyd explains the process to Sir Bairn. Baimyeong helps lift heavy items while Bangle cheers him on. With the basic construction complete, Lloyd leaves Sir Bairn in charge, mentioning that the biggest challenge will be the heating system. He recalls that Javier once survived a dragon's fire thanks to armor made from the hardened sap of the Alenzia tree, which is the best for insulation. Lloyd and Javier go to the Everglow forest to collect the sap. Javier warns that elves dislike humans and refuses to join, but Lloyd reminds him that he once flirted with an elf and got the armor as a present. Javier agrees to go, but he feels annoyed when Lloyd says he won't negotiate. He plans to steal instead. As they stroll through the Everglow forest, Javier sneezes in a fancy way. Lloyd looks puzzled, and Javier jokes that everything he does looks cool because he's good-looking, unlike Lloyd. This makes Lloyd feel down, and the system laughs at him, which annoys him even more. Javier joins in the laughter, saying Lloyd has no good comebacks. Frustrated, Lloyd tries to punch Javier, but Javier easily blocks all his hits. Exhausted, Lloyd tells Javier to stop messing around. Out of nowhere, an army of elves shows up and starts attacking them. Javier uses his aura sword to block their arrows, which surprises the elves. Lloyd tells Javier to stick to the plan, and they decide to split up. The elves choose to chase after the handsome guy, ignoring Lloyd and calling him useless, which makes Lloyd feel upset. Javier notices how quietly the elves move on the leaves and remembers what Lloyd said about them. He dodges their arrows and reaches a tree, knowing the elves won't harm it. But an arrow forces him to move again, and he realizes they are trying to lead him somewhere. Meanwhile, Lloyd digs a tunnel close to the Elysia tree. Javier arrives at a lake and figures out that the elves have planned this to trap him. They shoot hundreds of arrows at him, but he combines his aura sword with water to block them all. The elves start to panic, but their leader calms them down, saying they have Melika. A giant elf appears, ready to shoot a huge arrow at Javier. Javier is shocked when a giant elf shoots a powerful arrow that pushes him back. He realizes that if he harms any elf, all elves will seek revenge. As the elves prepare to attack again, Javier tightly grips his aura sword, struggling to protect Lloyd while avoiding hurting the elves. He blocks their arrows and skillfully deflects a huge arrow shot by Melika. Meanwhile, Lloyd is digging a tunnel for insulation materials when he finds himself surrounded by elves with arrows aimed at him. They demand his surrender, but Lloyd cleverly threatens to burn the plant if they try to stop him. The elves hesitate, but then insult him, saying he isn't liked by women, which angers Lloyd. He keeps his flames near the plant, forcing the elves to back off. One elf suggests talking, but Lloyd pretends to eat the plant, scaring them. Suddenly, the elves start to feel weak, and Lloyd notices the forest is unusually quiet with no birds or animals. He realizes that due to the monster domino effect, all the animals have moved west, leaving the elves without food. Meanwhile, Javier observes that the elves are growing tired. Javier runs towards the elves, but Melika shoots an arrow at him. He dodges it, getting a small scratch on his face. As he moves forward, he notices that the elves are too weak from hunger to fight well. Melika tries to block him and attacks again, but Javier easily avoids her. They start to fight, and Javier surprises the elves by using their own footwork technique, which shocks them because he learned it so fast. The elves shoot arrows at him, but he keeps going until he reaches the Elanesia tree and calls for Lloyd. Meanwhile, Lloyd is happily eating with the elves. When Javier arrives, he is surprised to see Lloyd eating pork. Lloyd invites him to join, and he agrees. Chief Mora asks if she can invite one more person, and Lloyd says yes. Melika joins them, and they wait for the pork to cook. Some elves get ready to attack, but the smell of food distracts them. Lloyd takes this opportunity to propose a deal. He offers unlimited pork coal and a refrigerator in exchange for Elanesia sap once a month and elf workers for help. However, the elf leader declines, saying she only makes deals with friends, leaving Lloyd puzzled about how to gain her trust. Lloyd surprises the elf leader by taking out special meat from his bag, which she has never seen before. He cooks it, making it even tastier, and the elves are amazed. The elf leader agrees to the deal with one condition: they must always receive this special meat. After being isolated for 500 years, the elves finally sign a business agreement with the humans of Frontiera Barony. Javier feels frustrated, realizing that food could have solved the conflict instead of fighting. The townspeople are surprised to see the elves and joke about Lloyd possibly bringing a dragon next. The elves notice the wooden buildings, and Lloyd explains that different people have different values. He needs to finish the apartments quickly before winter, as the insulation material is now available. If he delays, the ice could weaken the buildings when it melts in summer. Fortunately, the elves work quickly, motivated by the promise of more special meat. By winter, apartments 101 and 102 are completed. Lloyd creates an insulating paste and tests the heating system successfully, ordering the refugees to move in. On their way to the Baron's mansion, Lloyd and Javier hear a trumpet. A royal messenger arrives with a letter from the Queen, stating that the barony will be promoted to a county. The Baron and Baroness are overjoyed, and Lloyd feels proud of his success. The royal messenger reads the letter and announces that the imperial family will provide all construction materials and budget for the next 10 years. Additionally, the county will be exempt from taxes for 20 years. Lloyd is overjoyed and starts dancing while praising the Queen. He tells Javier they must go to the village immediately. When they arrive, they see a statue of the Queen with people dancing around it. The royal messenger is shocked and informs the Queen, who gets embarrassed and orders them to stop. Meanwhile, Lacona arrives at the county and meets the Count. The Count tells him to be informal, reminding Lacona of the time he used to tease him when he was just a poor baron. Now, Lacona hopes to regain his lost money. The Count asks if there are any available engineers, as the county has a shortage. Lacona hesitates but agrees to send as many as needed. The Count cleverly tricks him, forcing Lacona to give in again. Sir Bayer informs Lloyd that all rooms in apartment buildings 101 and 102 are full, earning Lloyd reward points. Lloyd checks on the residents and acts friendly. However, he soon tells them that it is time to repay their debts by signing labor contracts. The refugees are confused, and Lloyd smirks, reminding them that nothing is free. One man asks if he will get a job after signing. Lloyd assures him he will, but he must buy food and firewood with his own salary. The man agrees, wanting to support his family. A woman also asks to join, and Lloyd welcomes her, stating there's no gender discrimination. Soon, all refugees sign up. Lloyd informs them they will work on the Terrace Farmland project to provide food for everyone. He considers using Bangle for construction, but Baimyong stops him, as Bangle is exhausted from building the apartments. At night, Lloyd opens the summon creature auction, excited to get a new summon. He believes the system is always on his side, as it has given him helpful creatures before. He quickly presses the button, and the gears start moving, making loud noises. After a while, a huge explosion occurs, but nothing appears. The system tells him it was a dud. Lloyd gets frustrated and questions if the system is really on his side. The system laughs and says it is on nobody's side, explaining that gambling works by giving beginners hope and then making them expect another win. Lloyd, annoyed, tries again, but another explosion happens. He punches the screen, but the system dodges. He tries one last time and runs away, expecting another blast. This time, a huge beast appears and starts chasing him. Lloyd rushes to Javier for help, and Javier defeats the monster using his aura sword. The system then informs Lloyd that he has unlocked a hidden requirement and can now choose his summon skill. At first, all the skills seem useless, but he finds one that creates spiderwebs, which he thinks will help in construction. The next morning, Lloyd wakes up in the countryside, writing a new summon. The villagers are amazed and praise him. He realizes this creature can not only create spiderwebs but also fly, making it valuable for construction. However, the bird is lazy, crashes to the ground, falls asleep in a tree. Lloyd is confused and tries to figure out how to make it work. Lloyd uses his summon skill to get a new summon named Goming. When he asks Goming to show what he can do, Goming ignores him, sits down, and complains about working. He questions why he was born just to do labor, which confuses Lloyd since Goming is different from other summons. Povedong tries to motivate Goming by explaining the benefits of serving Lloyd, but Goming quickly goes back to being lazy. Povedong suggests they work harder together, but Goming refuses, saying hard work is pointless. Frustrated, Lloyd thinks about cooking Goming, but Parang stops him. Goming mocks Parang and spits a stick at him. Podong asks Lloyd for food, and Lloyd feeds Goming a red almond. Suddenly scared of Podong, Goming tries to escape, but Podong holds him down and puts his head in his mouth. Goming, now covered in saliva, has no choice but to start working, and Lloyd praises Podong's mischief. The construction work starts with digging and creating a slope. Beyond uses a large sieve to filter fine sand, while Goming lays spider webs in a mesh pattern. They cover the webs with sand and repeat this until the backfilling is complete. Once the backfill is strong, they add boulders and gravel to the gabion, finishing the first section. Lloyd is excited and dreams of raising taxes, creating jobs, and getting rich without much effort. After days of hard work, the terrace farmland in Frontera County is finished, and the system tells Lloyd he is now one of the best engineers on the continent. He is thrilled and receives a title that increases the farmland's harvest by 200%. Later, while playing chess alone, Javier asks if it's fun. Lloyd enjoys it and assures Javier that Sir Bayern will take care of construction. However, he remembers his father's advice and decides to check if everything is truly okay, heading to the training grounds to use his CP points for his skill. Lloyd clicks yes and suddenly finds himself in a dark space before returning to his room. He sees Javier doing something to his body and feels suspicious. Javier is full of mana and crying. As Lloyd gets closer, he realizes his own body is dried up and close to death. He tells Javier to stop, but Javier insists that Lloyd must live and burn something in the future. Confused, Lloyd reassures Javier that he has done well. Javier holds Lloyd's hand and cries more. Lloyd takes his last breath and dies, causing the summoned beings to vanish. Later, Lloyd realizes something terrible has happened and tries to stay calm. He follows Javier, who is carrying his lifeless body. Outside the mansion, he sees many dead bodies, including the Count and Countess. Javier pours oil on the corpses and lights them on fire, murmuring words. When Lloyd asks what he said, Javier repeats, "Remember empty." Shocked, Lloyd returns to his training ground and understands it was a secret message from his future self. Lloyd talks to Sir Bayern about needing more quarrymen. Bayern is concerned about the cost, but Lloyd explains that a growing population might cause the river to freeze, leading to cholera. He decides to build underground sewers to prevent this disaster using his inspection skill.